Hey everybody, I'm gonna show you how I made this 6-foot American flag. It's gonna be huge. All right, everybody, welcome to my page. I'm Brian with Fort-Knox Company, and I'm gonna show you how I made this 6-foot American flag. It's basically, imagine a dining room table, but it's a piece of art. And you take that dining room table and you hang it up on your wall. That's how big this thing's gonna be. It's not gonna be built like your average American flag that you might see around on Pinterest or Etsy or something like that. This is a Fort-Knox flag. So I'm just gonna show you guys what I went through and everything that goes into making one of these flags. This is an order that I have right now for a 6-foot flag. It's gonna be 3x6. It's gonna be a big build. It's gonna be heavy. It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be awesome. So I'll show you guys what goes into it and how I made this flag step by step. So first we gotta chop down everything to our finished width and length. So that's gonna be 3x6, which is your standard flag size. It's usually a 1:2 ratio. So we're gonna cut all of our lumber down to just about 6 feet so we have a little bit to play with. Next, I'm gonna run everything through a joiner so I get a nice clean edge, and then I'm gonna run that material through the table saw so that I can get my finished width. This flag is made out of 13 pieces of individual wood, solid redwood, solid whitewood. So I need to make sure that all 13 pieces, when they're put together, equals 3 feet. So we'll do the math on that and we'll cut everything down to width on the table saw. So now that we have everything cut down to width, we're gonna do the hardest part, which is the glue up. This takes a little bit of patience, a little bit of experience because I've done this before. I kind of know what to expect, but every glue up is a little bit different because you never know how it's gonna act. But I'll show you guys what I did to get it to all line up. And the goal here is to keep everything as straight as possible. When we're finished with the glue up, we're gonna hand grind this thing down to our finished surface and our look that we want. And it needs to still be pretty flat to hang on the wall. But with 13 pieces coming together, anything could go wrong. Now that we have everything glued together and it's looking good, it's looking straight, it's time to actually get this thing planed out. And I like to do it by hand. This is my style. These are some of the things that I do when I make my flags. There's a lot of ways to do this, but this is what I actually do to my flags. I'm gonna hit it with a 4.5-inch paddle wheel. I'm gonna grind this thing down by hand. It does take a little bit of work because I'm gonna be grinding down all those uneven surfaces, but this is gonna give it a really cool texture and it looks like saw marks, and I'm literally grinding this thing down just like you would like metal welds with this grinding wheel, but I'm gonna be doing this to the wood. It's gonna create a little bit of a wave feature. I can kind of control the finished surface look. Then I come back for even another pass, but I use a different wheel. And because this flag is so big, I will actually do this because I have the ability to add a lot of really heavy texture, and it's gonna look really good when I actually finish the flag. After the paint's on there, after all the clear coats are on there, it's gonna actually sit into these dark, these deep grooves. It's gonna look a little bit darker, and it's gonna add a lot of really rich texture to this flag. So on the bigger flags, I like to do this because it doesn't take away from it. On a smaller flag, it may be too much. It makes it look too busy. But on these big flags, it looks really, really nice. So I'm gonna take a last pass on the texturing with a different wheel. It's a little bit heavier of a grinding disc. So once I have all the texture there and I have the surfaces all planed out, I do all my little custom touches to the edges and all the way around this thing. 360, it's been taken care of. I grind the front, the back. I have some of my signature marks that I like to put on there. There's certain marks on Fort-Knox flags that I will repeat on every flag. They're not very distinct, but I can identify them, and most people who've seen my flags can kind of pick them out. But there's certain things that I like to put into my flags that I make that are just kind of like my little signature touches. So it's fun for me to do. It's also something that I kind of like to repeat on pieces when I can. So it's fun to do that. Now that I have it all ground down to the finished surface that I like and I'm liking the texture that's there, I'll hit the whole thing with a sander. I'll usually start with the heavy grit and then I'll finish up with a little bit higher grit to get a smoother finish. This helps when I tape off stuff for paint. It also helps when I go to clear coat it because I like to clear coat things by hand. I don't usually use a sprayer. So the smoother surface really helps when I'm using like a cloth or some type of brush to put the clear on. So I'll hit the whole thing with a sander. Now that I have it all sanded down, it's ready for paint. And on this flag in particular, they wanted the Betsy Ross flag, which is that circle of stars. So I'll use a compass to actually mark out my circle, and I use this as a reference line to then hand place all the stars. A lot of the things I like to do on the Fort-Knox flags that I make is I actually place all the stars by hand. Again, it's just my method of doing it, but it adds a little bit of variation to it. They're almost always spot on, but they're not gonna be perfect. But I have kind of gained an eye for it and a method of making sure that they're very symmetrical and even looking. But there is something to the look of the stars being hand placed. I'm not just taking a stencil and throwing it down there and painting over it and repeating that same stencil over and over. Every flag I make, the stars are placed by hand. Even when I use reference lines, there is always a little bit of room for variation. So I keep it true to the specs of the flag, but I also like to do things by hand as much as I can to make sure that they're all one of a kind. So I make my reference line with that compass, and then I can place my stars around that circle. There is a certain way that these stars align, and again, I've studied flags and the ways that they're all made and measured, so I try to keep everything true to that. And it's my way of really honoring the flag. I don't want to do any crazy variations unless it's like a custom order that somebody wants. If I'm going to make a flag, I'm going to keep it very true to the original specs. So I do this, and with the reference line on this circle, it comes out really, really nice, very clean look, seeing those stars in that perfect circle. And now that I have all the stars placed, I tape off the field, which is the area of blue that I will be painting. Another goal of mine when I make my flags is to use the least amount of paint as possible. So the whole reason this flag is made out of 13 pieces of wood is because this is solid redwood and solid whitewood or white pine. And I try to bring the colors of the flag into the build from the actual wood. I don't want to paint the wood red and paint the wood white. I like to actually use white wood and redwood. Unfortunately, I haven't found anywhere that sells blue wood. Otherwise, I'd probably be using that. But I do have to use blue for the field on these flags. But that's pretty much it. No other paint. I've had one or two special requests where they really wanted the stars to be white, so I painted an underlayment of white there, but I didn't like doing that. I like to just show the wood off. My whole goal in my flags that I make is to show the beauty of the wood off. So I will use the minimal amount of paint, and in this case, I have to use the blue paint around the field for the stars. But when I peel off those stars, it will actually reveal the wood underneath of it, and you'll see. So now that the paint's done and I got all those stars removed, you can really see how beautiful it is showing the wood through there. And again, my flags, I like to emphasize the wood and the grain and anything that comes with it, knots or holes or any imperfections. I like to show that off because it's natural, it's gonna be custom. If you get a flag that I make, there's not gonna be another one like it. And that's one of the great things about these. Now it's time to actually put the clear on. I'm happy with how everything's turned out. So I usually like to start with a water-based because it dries really fast. It usually doesn't really affect the color of the wood too much. If you've noticed, if you've ever done any type of stain before, oil-based stains will add a little bit of a yellow tint to the wood. Even without any type of natural stain on it, it will start to tint the wood yellowish. So I like to hit it with a water-based stain first because it usually doesn't affect the actual coloring of the wood. It also reacts less to the paint. So if you put an oil-based stain over the paint, it will sometimes start to act like a solvent, and it will actually start to smear the paint sometimes. So I've learned that the water-based sealers don't really do that. So I'll hit the whole thing with the water-based, and then I'll go over it with some oil-based stain because the guy that I'm building this for right now, they actually like that look of that aged or yellowed or weathered look. So I'm gonna do several coats of oil-based on this to give it that aged, weathered look. And because of all those saw marks that I put into it, it's gonna look really nice. So let's go ahead and start applying that clear, and we'll do several coats here, probably at least 3 to 4. And I'll hit each one in between with a high grit sandpaper, usually a 400 to an 800, and it's just a light scuff. And I'll even leave the dust or the powder that's left behind, because I like to kind of work that all into the clear because I'm looking for this aged look. That leftover residue will sometimes embed itself into the saw marks, and it adds for more texture and depth. So I usually will leave that there, and I don't try to clean off the surface too much. And after a couple coats of this with a 400 or 800 grit in between, you'll start to get a really nice smooth finish, and it turns out really, really nice at the end. After all those layers of clear, I like the way it's looking, so I'm pretty much done with it. Because this flag is so big, I'm gonna install some heavy duty hardware on the back. I usually install D-rings on anything that's 36 inches or bigger. So this is obviously a lot bigger than that. On smaller flags, I have a couple different types of hooks that I like to install. But when I start getting into these bigger or heavier flags, like I said in the beginning, this is basically like a dining room table. I'm gonna use some D-hooks, and I'm gonna actually screw this into the back to make sure that it doesn't have any problems coming out. And I even recommend to people that if they're gonna install this and I'm not installing it, that they try to find a stud or two in the wall and then readjust those hooks on the back to kind of align with it so that you can hang it where you want, but make sure that you're anchored into a stud. These things are heavy, but they're beautiful, and they're really big statement pieces in houses. So if you're ever gonna do something that big, I recommend the heavy duty hardware. I always install it on my bigger flags. And here it is in all its glory. I couldn't be happier how this thing turned out. It has a satin finish on it. You can see the saw marks and the edges. They got little gouges and grind marks. I know this is going up in someone's house and they're gonna be proud to show it off. When people come over and see it, it's a huge statement piece, and there's not gonna be another flag like it. Even if I tried, I couldn't replicate this. Every flag is unique in its own way, and I couldn't be happier with how this thing turned out. And that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you liked the video. I hope you guys have already subscribed to my channel. If you haven't, go ahead and hit that button in the bottom. There's a little icon right there. It'll help you subscribe. Otherwise, in the sidebar, there's a subscribe button. It helps me out, and I hope you guys like the content that I'm putting out for you. This is just a little walkthrough of some of the stuff that I do when I make my flags. It was a really cool one to make because these big ones I don't get to make very often. I have made them for a couple other dining room tables where I actually use them as a tabletop, but it's even more cool when I get to do it and they're gonna be just on the wall, because it's literally just a piece of art that someone's gonna hang in their house, and I'm honored to be able to do that. So if you guys have any questions or you wanna know more about the steps that I took during this video, go ahead and put them in the comments below and I'll reply back and I'll answer anything that you have. And in the meantime, like, subscribe, share this video, and I'll see you on the next build.